Does your mouse double click? Well, don't throw it away. Let me show you how to fix it for less than $1. First off, because I know everybody is going to ask, on our workbench today is the original Razer Basilisk. This mouse was used reliably for about 7 years. A friend of mine started to experience the dreaded double clicking issue, and she started to drop everything on our repo runs. I happily volunteered to fix it so that maybe I can help somebody out there looking to fix their own mouse. I know some of you think she should just get a new mouse, but she liked her Basilisk more than anything else I own, and if we can squeeze a few more years of service out of this guy by doing a short repair, then I'm all for it. In order to do this repair, you'll need a few things. We need a soldering iron, rosin core solder, some desoldering wick, a vise or something similar to hold the PCB in place, flux, which basically just lets the solder flow easier and adhere properly, and your choice of mechanical mouse switches. If it's your first time attempting something like this, I'll leave some links in the description for what I'm using in the video today. Disclaimer, attempt any of these repairs at your own risk. If it's your first time doing something like this, I would definitely start on something that you won't care if you mess up. Please be careful using a soldering iron since they operate between 300 and 380 degrees Celsius. That's like 600 to 715 degrees Fahrenheit for my American friends, and do this in a well-ventilated area. Oh, and if you're not an adult, please ask your parents. Getting started, we need to remove the PTFE skates off the mouse. Most manufacturers put the assembly screws under the skates on the bottom. I'm carefully removing them with a scalpel blade that I generally use for woodworking. This way I should be able to squeeze a little more life out of them and reinstall them once the repair is completed. Next, I'm going to remove all the screws and keep them organized so I know that these are the screws used for the shell assembly. When I tried to pull the shell and bottom plate apart, it appears there's one more hidden screw. A quick trick for you is you can kind of push around with a tool and it should outline the cavity where it's located, where at least you suspect it is. This one was located under the sticker with the serial number information. You shouldn't have to force these too hard to come apart. So if it feels like you're going to break it when you're in this phase, just take a second and see if you can find a hidden screw like I did. Now the mouse opens with no issues. We're going to carefully separate the top shell from the bottom plate, making sure we don't add any stress to the Molex cable. Every mouse with side buttons is going to have this cable. It attaches the daughter board for the side buttons to the PCB. Carefully, we're going to unplug the cable from the PCB. It's worth mentioning that this is a wired mouse with no battery. If you have a wireless mouse with a battery, make sure to unplug it during this step. And here we can see the entire layout of the mouse. A pro tip for you here, I always think it's a good idea to take a picture of the internal layout. For example, on this mouse, the stock Omron switches face in a way that's not typical. Usually they're facing outward the other way. So before I do any work, I always take a picture so I have that for reference in case I forget the placement of anything. The inside of this little guy was pretty dirty, so I'm going to give it a quick cleaning with my air duster. Next, we're going to remove the screws that hold the PCB to the bottom plate. Unless you have a final mouse, then you have to heat up some hot glue. Make sure to put these screws aside separately from the others. Don't mix up your screws, people. Now that we've freed the PCB from its mortal coil, a quick inspection reveals that there's dirt and grime buildup on some of the contacts. I'm going to securely fasten the PCB to my desktop vise and rub away what I can with isopropyl rubbing alcohol and Kohl's toothbrush. Now that we have the patient sanitary and prepped for surgery, I'm going to turn on my soldering iron to start heating it up. You'll notice that the mouse switches have 3 contact points that stick through the PCB that are soldered to the board. I find it's easiest to remove the old mouse switches by following these steps. First, since we're not reusing the old switches, I clip the metal leads that poke out past the PCB. I try to get them as close to the solder joints as possible. Second, I'm going to cover the solder joints in a generous amount of flux. Third, I'm going to tin my soldering iron. This is the process of applying a thin layer of solder to the heated soldering iron tip. It makes it easier for the heat to flow. Again, don't breathe these fumes, please. And lastly, I'm going to get a strip of desoldering wick. Basically, my method is to heat up the solder joints and suck up the solder with the wick. I'm going to repeat this a few times, giving the PCB short breaks in between the cooldown. It is possible to overheat your PCB and potentially damage components or lift the pads and damage traces, so try not to do that. So I'm going to remove the solder in a couple of passes. After I've removed as much as I think I can, I'm going to grab the switch on the opposite side with some pliers and gently pull as I heat up each of the leads. Eventually, the switch should just pop out. Once it does, I'm going to add some more flux and try to remove any remaining solder I can. Then after that, I'm going to clean it all up with some rubbing alcohol. Repeat this on both sides. Now that we have the old Omron switches removed and the PCB cleaned up, we're going to install the new mouse switches. I chose Blue Kale GM 2.0s for this installation. If you're not familiar with mouse switches, I would recommend buying a few different sets from AliExpress and seeing which fits you best. The two things that matter most for me personally is the timbre and stiffness. The Kale GM switches will actuate with 70 gram force. I describe the blues as medium tactile, but the real difference between the GM 2.0, 4.0, and 8.0s is going to be the rating for the click lifespan. I'm going to insert the mouse switch into the PCB, making sure it's facing the correct orientation. If you're not sure, remember to check that picture I told you to take earlier. I told you you'd need it. I'm going to take a small stand I have that has an alligator clip on the end that I've named Mr. Hands to help me hold the switch in place. Make sure it's flush and completely flat with the surface. Once everything is prepped, we're going to once again add a generous amount of flux and tin our soldering iron. Then we're going to touch the soldering iron to the solder pads while adding a small amount of solder. You'll want to hold it there for a solid 2 seconds to give the solder an opportunity to flow. Repeat this for each solder pad and for the other side of the mouse. Congratulations! Our new mouse switches are installed. It looks pretty cool too. Too bad no one's ever going to see it or know about it except for you. Well, I guess and your mom, because you're going to tell her, right? I'm also going to plug the mouse into a PC just to confirm that the switches are actually working. And you can see here, they're fine. We can finally reinstall all the components back to where they belong. We'll screw the PCB back into place, making sure we're properly tracing the USB cable. We can also plug in the Molex cable from the shell back into the PCB and screw that back on top too. I lucked out and I'm pretty sure I can reuse these mouse skates. If you get to this point and you don't think the skates are salvageable, then just get some universal dot skates. They'll work for anything. Link in the description. I thought the shot was really cool and I didn't want to waste it, so make sure you like and subscribe and watch all the way through so I can make money. Plugging this guy into my PC and booting up Aim Labs, you can see that this guy works just fine. The double clicking issue is officially fixed and this mouse is ready for another 4 to 5 years of service. For sure not the most up-to-date version of the Razer Basilisk. The new version is something like $160. I have a review on it. Go check it out if you feel like supporting the channel. But for her use case, this is going to operate completely fine, with the added bonus of saving her over $100 for a new replacement. So it's a pretty good trade-off in my opinion. And, you know, any excuse to pull out my soldering iron and tinker. I love it. And there you go, guys. A completely repaired mouse ready for another 4 to 5 years of use at the low cost of some elbow grease and $1's worth of new switches. If there's any other technical stuff you'd like to see me do, let me know in the comments down below. As always, thank you for watching. I hope you learned something, and until next time, GG.